Jolie. She's the Chief Corporate Officer. She'll be on her way. I believe she's on Lawrence Avenue. Yeah, she's almost here. And we also have Neil Creswell. He's the Director of Community Planning at Etobicoke, York. Okay, before we start, I just want to make a few comments. First of all, thank you everyone for coming out to tonight's meeting. And I'm glad that the weather is great. Over the weekend I thought it was going to be cold and rainy, so I'm glad that it's this wonderful weather and most of the residents were able to walk to tonight's meeting. So in addition to advertising this meeting through my e-news updates, notices were sent out by mail to all homes in Ward 11 north of Lawrence Avenue. So all the homes north of Lawrence Avenue received it by postal. And I know that a lot of people received the notices, and some residents received actually 2 notices, I'm told. So we're here tonight to talk about Humber River Hospital. As you know, Humber River Hospital will be closing their Church Street site later this month. And some of you were at the meeting I held in June 2014 at the hospital site. How many people attended that meeting? Okay, great. And where the hospital CEO spoke about the new hospital at Keele Wilson and about their intention to sell the Church Street site. They need the funds from the sale of the Church Street site to help pay for the new hospital. That's what we were told that evening. And everyone wants to know how the site will be developed. We do not know it as the site has not yet been sold. The hospital has not been able to put the site up for sale because of a covenant on title for a 1.25 acre parcel of property. The parcel was sold to the hospital in 1948 by the former town of Weston for hospital purposes. The covenant stated that if the land was no longer required for hospital purposes, the city could purchase it back at the same price to which it was sold, which was $835. That was in 1948. The hospital asked the city to confirm we have no interest in 1.25 acres, to which we said, no, we do not agree with the hospital. And so since then, the hospital has filed a notice of application against the city, seeking a declaration that the city has no interest or any rights to the 1.25 acres of land. So this meeting has been arranged so that the city solicitor can explain the notice of application to you in detail and to explain the process going forward. And I would also at this time like to introduce our provincial member of Parliament, Laura Benezek. Laura?
Hey, Laura.
And Mike Sullivan.
Mike. Hey, Mike.
So I'm now going to pass it on to staff to speak. So we'll pass it on to the city solicitor. And if we can wait to the end, then you can ask questions. Now we do have a mic there. So if anybody wants to ask any questions, if you can line up behind that microphone and ask your question.
So thank you very much for coming out to listen to us this evening. There are 4 areas that I'd like to talk to you about. And it's firstly going to give you a little bit of background on the dispute. And then I'd like to provide you with some information on what is an application all about and what's that court process like. Thirdly, I'd like to discuss what the hospital is arguing in their notice of application and what the relief they're seeking is. And finally, I'll give you some comments about litigation in general and what that means for the parties in the dispute. So as the councillor explained, this dispute is really about this 1948 transaction and a covenant that was put on title. And this 1.25 acre parcel, because the hospital is expecting to sell it, they want to get some certainty in terms of what that means for the city. Does this city have this option to purchase the 1.25 acres for $835? They have brought this application in Ontario's Superior Court of Justice, and it's an application that will be heard in front of a judge if it proceeds. In terms of what an application is, it's a type of court proceeding that gets commenced by this notice, and the notice, all it is, it's a written document that tells what the hospital is asking the court to answer. And they're asking the court to answer the question, does the city have this right to purchase the 1.25 acres? And they tell the court in this notice of application that they think the answer is no. They think that the city doesn't have this right to purchase, and they have various reasons why they say that, and I'll explain that in just a few moments. In terms of how that gets heard by a judge, the facts go in not by interviewing witnesses on a stand or anything like that. It actually goes in by written affidavits. So the hospital will have someone who tells their story about the facts, essentially what the covenant is and how the transaction happened, what they're doing with the site now in terms of trying to sell it, and that's all going to be sworn to in an affidavit, so someone will testify to those facts, and it's all in writing. If the city thinks that there's other facts that need to be brought to the court's attention, we'll do that in a likewise fashion by putting it in a written affidavit and getting someone to swear to it. So the judge, when they hear this application, part of it's just going to be them reading the material, and part of that material is going to include written legal argument. So each of the parties to the dispute get this opportunity to set out in writing what facts they think are the relevant ones, why the facts are relevant, and what the law says about those facts and what it means in terms of the dispute. So this, you can think of it as an essay, and this legal argument, it follows this path of setting out the facts, telling what the case law is, saying what statute says, and then explaining what the arguments are for that party's position. So presumably the hospital is going to put forward their legal arguments on why they should be successful in the application and that the city would not be entitled to any right to purchase the land. Likewise, for the city, we'd be putting forward our legal arguments on why the city's position should be successful. You then get in front of the judge, and the judge will hear oral argument to supplement this written material, and the judge can ask questions of counsel, they can test your position, they can go into the written argument and see if there's issues with it. Then once that's done, the judge is going to do one of two things. They're either going to issue a decision right there on the spot, or they're going to reserve and give that decision at a later time if they need time to consider it. Either way, you get a written decision eventually. So that's a bit on the process. In terms of timing, the hospital is looking to schedule this application for the end of this month. The court date has not yet been set, but that they're looking towards October 30th. And we understand that the court has a date available for that. Now, the third area I'm going to speak to you about is what are the hospital's arguments in this notice of application, and what are they seeking in terms of relief. So they have several legal arguments that they put forward in the notice of application. The first is that the town of Weston, when they passed a bylaw to transfer this land back in 1948, the bylaw didn't say that you could put in this covenant about the right to purchase it is no longer used for hospital purposes. So they're saying that because a municipality can only speak through bylaws, and the bylaw didn't actually speak to this covenant, covenant shouldn't have been there in the first place. So that's their one argument that they put in the notice of application. So they say the covenant, there was no authority for the municipality to put it in the deed, shouldn't have been there. The second argument they make is that, and this is a technical argument, I'm not going to get into it too much, but they say that it violates the rule against perpetuities. This is a technical legal argument. I'm not going to comment on whether there's merit to it or not. Tonight, you might have questions about, okay, well, how good is the hospital's case? How good is the city's case? I can't get into that with you tonight. These are matters of privilege for the city, so I provide legal advice to the city, and that's what I'll do. I'll help them assess what the risks are in terms of the litigation, but I can't tell you here tonight whether the hospital's arguments are good ones or not, but I will tell you what they are. The hospital makes another argument in their notice of application, and it's that the covenant, it violates section 119 sub 9 of the Land Titles Act. And what they say in that regard is that that section of the Land Titles Act says there's a deemed expiry of any covenant that's been on title for more than 40 years. And as you know, this has been on title for more than 40 years. So that's their third argument. They also have an argument that suggests because they're going to use the proceeds of the sale to fund the new hospital, that the land will actually continue to be used for hospital purposes. So they're using this within the context of the covenant to say that they're still meeting the intended purpose of it, and that is to have the hospital. So that's a fourth argument. They also argue that it's a nullity because it's a violation of another technical legal argument. I'm not going to get into too much detail on that, but they make these 5 essential arguments, okay? Now, in each of these arguments, what they're seeking in terms of relief is that the city has no right or interest in the property. Presumably, they're seeking this so they can sell it more effectively and to de-risk the sale to a potential purchaser. One can presume that a potential purchaser would pay more for the site if there isn't this uncertainty about whether the city has a right or interest in the property. So this is precisely why I think they brought this application at the time. So a few comments now to end in terms of general litigation. So I've been a litigator with the city for 7 years. I've appeared in all levels of court in Ontario, including several appearances at the Ontario Court of Appeal. And it's in my experience that it's a fair statement that all litigation has an element of risk to it. This is something that has to be considered by the parties with the assistance of their legal counsel. And in getting that advice to the city, it's my professional obligation to encourage them to consider if there's an appropriate settlement available and to weigh whether that's something to follow through on. The reason why parties tend to settle in litigation, and I've seen figures that as many as 95% of litigation matters settle before an actual hearing of the matter. The reason that happens is because people prefer certainty over uncertainty. So you may think to yourself, okay, if we litigate this matter, I might be able to get this result up here. And I'm being offered a result that isn't quite as good, but if we agree to it, then we know we have it. We don't have to wait and see what a judge thinks about it. We don't have to deal with risk. And that's my experience, that people do prefer these types of certain outcomes. It's not clear to me that there is a potential settlement to be had in this matter, but it is something that we'll have to consider, and if there's an appropriate settlement that staff think is acceptable, then it'd be our obligation to report that to City Council, so City Council can make a decision on whether it's something they want to move forward on. So that's a general overview of what the application is about, what the process is like, and just a few comments for you to think about in terms of what it means to be in the midst of litigation and how to deal with those risks for each of the parties. So those are the general comments. Oh yeah, so Josie Strolley is now here, and
Hi. So the councillor has had us. I'm going to step to the side here because there's real echo coming from that thing. Anyway, the councillor has had both myself, Tim, and Josie involved in this matter for a number of months now. So you've heard about the legal portion or the legal aspects of what we're dealing with at this point. But I just wanted to relay to everyone tonight that from the real estate side, what we are trying to do is come to some sort of settlement with this entity or the hospital. So those, I'll say, discussions have gone on for the past 8 months or so. Offers have gone back and forth, but I'm not able to tell you what's in those offers at this point. But I will say that in terms of when recommendations go to City Council, real estate will be making, I'll say, a pitch for what we think is the best settlement that we think might be possible, along with our legal. Okay, so that's kind of where we stand. Those discussions can happen up to and including court case. And Rodney, you tell me if I'm wrong on that.
No, that's correct. So you can have settlements that are quite late in the day, and it is the case. There's this old phrase on the courthouse steps this kind of thing does happen. If we thought we had something agreed to in principle, but subject to city council saying whether they agree or not, we would probably ask the other side to hold off on the court application to allow that to be in front of city council. Because there isn't delegated authority to staff to deal with this type of matter, it is something that requires city council's approval.
Okay, so at this point, we'll ask if anybody has any questions, if you want to come forward, and there's a microphone. Just for the residents that attended the June 2014 meeting, as you know, if it wasn't for this covenant, 1.25 acres, that Humber Hospital, they intended to sell the hospital over a year ago. They would have sold the hospital by then. So basically, the 1.25 acres has held it up at this point.
My name is Anna Nelson. I live in the area. One thing I want to ask is if this goes through, that the city lets this property go and it is sold to a developer, does the city have the rights to what will be built on that property? Because most of the residents from that last meeting, our great concern is our little area is overloaded with traffic and homes already. And our concern is that a lot of housing will go in, small townhouses, or possibly an apartment building, and it's just going to increase the amount of cars and stuff in our area. So that's one of my concerns, is will the city have some rights?
So Neil from our planning staff, and just as the solicitor mentioned, that we mentioned it's not selling or letting the hospital have the land, that hopefully that we can reach a settlement which would benefit the city.
Yeah, so I'll have a couple comments and then I'll hand it over to Neil. It's a very good question, and what I think I should highlight for everyone is that this dispute about the covenant is really limited to the covenant. So it's about whether we might be able to obtain some benefit for this community in terms of, can we obtain some land out of this that can be put to community use. That's what we're hopeful of. In terms of the development of the site, that's a totally separate process. So if they want to redevelop it and some type of intensification, then what they have to do is go through that planning process. And there are rights with respect to the city and the community to be engaged in that process and to have their voices heard, especially on types of matters that go to the livability of your community, things like traffic, these things. I expect Neil's going to talk to you a bit about that more, but I just wanted to give you the comfort that anything done in relation to this litigation is separate and apart from what they might be doing in terms of trying to redevelop this site. And anything, like whether we receive a favorable decision, an unfavorable decision, or there's some sort of negotiated settlement, it's not going to impact what's happening in terms of development. Okay?
Thank you. Good evening. First question, planning? Really? Okay. So the question about the development of the lands raises a whole bunch of different issues. So the lands themselves are governed effectively from a land use perspective by two city documents. The one is the official plan, and the other is the city zoning bylaw. The city's official plan is a long-term policy document that expresses through a whole series of policies about how council wants to see the city grow over the next 20 to 30 years. In the official plan, the lands in their entirety are designated institutional uses. So what's permitted through the official plan right now are institutional uses like hospitals and those kinds of uses, large buildings on large plots of land. So if Humber Hospital decides to sell the land, and they sell the land to anybody who wants to do anything other than large-scale institutional uses, it will require an official plan amendment. And I'll get into that in a second. The second document, which lays out the very detailed specificity of what you can do on the property, is the zoning bylaw. It's a split zoning on the property because part of the land is zoned in the old North York zoning bylaw and part of the land is zoned on the old City of York bylaw. Basically, the extension of Woodward across the property is the zoning line. The vast majority of the property is zoned under the North York bylaw, not surprisingly, as hospital. So the uses that you would imagine with a hospital are encoded within the zoning bylaw, and the location of the buildings on the property right now are also encoded in the zoning bylaw. The southern half of the property, basically below Woodward, is zoned single-family residential. So it has a residential zoning on a piece of, and I think it's a remnant from the former development across the front of their property on the south side, because there are a couple of single-family homes on the property. So if the hospital sells it to somebody who wants to do anything other than hospital, it will require a zoning bylaw amendment application. So the question, I'm sorry, the lady who asked the question is right. So if Humber Hospital sells it to a development interest that is looking to create some form of residential development in whatever way, shape, or form, it will require an official plan amendment. It will require a zoning bylaw amendment. Both of those processes, as the solicitor has told you, entail a lot of public consultation. In terms of your commentary about traffic, it would require traffic studies by the applicant. It would require planning rationale. It will require studies on impacts on the community in terms of schools, parks, daycares, all the community services and facilities. It would require studies on water and sewer servicing and on the whole range of things. So, if and when the hospital sells the land, there's a very public process, but again, it's very separate from the litigation issue, which we're here to talk about, but that, again, that's why I'm here, because we figured this question would come up at some point in time during the evening. So, if it does emerge that there is a proposal for anything other than a hospital or an institutional, obviously through the counselor's office and through the planning applications that are brought forward, there will be a full round of public consultation about what that new owner is seeking to do. One other little quick comment around that is the Planning Act says anybody can file any development application they see fit at any point in time. The municipality does not have the legislative authority to say, we think that's a really bad idea, take it away, we don't even want to think about that. We don't have that authority under the Planning Act. We have the right responsibility to respond to it through council, and if council says we think it's a bad idea and we turn it down, that's what we do. But what we cannot do is reject the application out of hand and say you can't file that application. So when the property is sold, while all indications are Humber Hospital wants to sell the property, so when they sell that property, that new owner will have the ability to file whatever development application they see fit. Okay? I guess next question?
Yes.
So, it's good to know that the entire plot of land is in the official plan as institutional.
Right.
Which a long-term care seniors facility would in fact qualify as institutional, I suspect.
It could not. It depends how it operates. So again, you're getting into questions, but it could. Yes. If it's in conjunction with some other facilities, it could. Yes.
And so I had a conversation with the CEO of the hospital in Devon about 2.5 years ago when he said that the province has instructed the hospital to come up with $200 million of the value of the new hospital, and that the sale of these two plots of land, both here and at the Kiel site, was part of the community's contribution to the new hospital, in his words, and that their intention was to get as much profit out of those pieces of land as they could. So it is within the power of the province to say to the hospital, and I know that this isn't the topic of this conversation, but it is within the power of the province to say, okay, you don't have to sell that piece, we'll give you the money, we'll forgive you the $200 million or part of it, that would have come from this piece of land, and you can use that, as many in the community think, as a long-term care facility, because it's already, there are several examples in the province of conversions of hospitals to long-term care facilities, 2 in Ottawa, 1 in Parry Sound, I believe there are others. But that's outside the scope of this, I know. But at least the city is allowed to have that discussion with the province, because the province is effectively at the table suing the city. And a whole bunch of lawyers are gonna get rich. But, at the expense of the town of Weston. So I guess my question is really for the province, is will the province think about whether or not this whole dispute can be ended by allowing the hospital not to have to sell the land?
Well, I'll let Laura respond to that. But at the meeting that we had in 2014, it was very clear that everybody was there, that wanted some sort of long-term care, health facility, daycare, sort of a mixed use. So it was very clear at that meeting. So Laura, did you want to respond on that?
Before you do that, Francis, I'm sort of locked into your second up there, but I just have a question. What is the end game of the city? Is it to block the sale so that they can then choose what they want to do with it? Or is it to monetize the sale so that the city gets the money?
So I guess,
I don't think we want the $835.
No, but if you could buy it for $835 and sell it for $845 million, that would be a good flip.
so I'll answer it this way. I see kind of 2 parts to your question. One is blocking the sale. That's not going to happen. Yeah, so I'm just going to paraphrase if that's okay. So the question was really, what's the city's end game here? Is the city going to try and block the sale, or is the city going to try and monetize this and get the most out? Is that fair?
Yeah.
So in terms of the blocking the sale, that's not something that's really on the table, because they have this right to bring the application, and it is going to get adjudicated upon. So that means we are going to get a decision on it if we're not able to settle it. So there'll be a final determination. There's no blocking the sale.
But it doesn't feel to block the sale if they couldn't sell that parcel. That could revert back to the city.
So so I understand this part of the question too. So if we get this 1.25 acres, does that essentially make them unable to sell the rest of the plot? I think the answer to that is no. It's over an 11-acre site. They will be able to monetize this. That would be my expectation. In terms of what's the city's end game, and this is what the city staff are always trying to do, and this is what city council, I believe, is always doing, and that's making the best decisions for the city. And what I see that as being is getting the most value out of it that we can for this community and the city as a whole. So that's why we're considering if there's some kind of certain outcome that we can get that improves the lot of the city and this community. That's what we're going to try and do. But we can't get into specifics.
But when you say get the most value for the community, are you talking financial value or?
So no, what we've been, I'll let the counselor speak to this too, but what we've been thinking is what's best for the community is actually to improve the amount of parkland in the area.
Okay, so that's the answer.
Yeah, it's not financial, it's what the community can benefit what goes on that site. As you know, in 2014, when we found out about this covenant, we talked about nursing home, senior residence, daycare. So at that point, I would have thought that maybe the hospital would have listened and to some of the people that approached them, that they would be interested in doing this in this community, right? And so we don't have to go through this legal case. But no, they would not listen. The last thing they said to me, Mr. Devlin, is I'll see you in court. So, they never wanted to work with the community. They want to get their money, get out, and that's it. Okay, Laura, did you want to respond?
Sure, and I'm sorry I'm not facing everybody, but, so what I want to
Sorry,
say.
would you like this one?
Probably better if I'm facing people. So what I wanted to clear up is hospitals in the province of Ontario are independent corporations. They're governed by the Hospitals Act, but they have to respond to their board of directors. The way hospitals are built in the province of Ontario is that 90% of the cost of the hospital is provided by the province, and 10% it's usually raised through what it's called the local share. So it's not that the province instructs the hospital for that money, but the hospital raises the local share. What does that mean? Usually, and I guess this must go back in time, the hospital had to prove that the community wanted that hospital in that community, and residents were in organizations, I guess, of the community wanted to have that institution in their neighborhood, and therefore they would raise this local share. And this is the way hospitals are usually built. In the case of Humber River Hospital, they have chosen to raise their local share to sell the two sites that we have in York Southwestern. One being the old Northwestern Hospital on Keele Street, and the second one being this one on Church Street. And for the time being, they are keeping some activity at the Finch site for the moment. The other thing I wanted to say that the council is right in saying that we haven't had a chance to work with the community. We've tried to speak to the hospital CEO, who has has refused to meet with us, and it's unfortunate that we have another case, for example, in the community of York Southwestern with West Park, where the hospital has decided to redevelop their excess lands to keep them in their possession, and they're redeveloping those lands, and they're gonna build seniors buildings, assisted living, and so they're working toward raising their local share by keeping that land and let's say the revenue that will come from that is what will raise their local share. In the case of Humber River, they're not interested in doing that. So there is no law that will prevent them from doing that. So I want to be clear, the province doesn't own that land. We've been trying to work to find a solution that is that reflects the vision of the community. And we have, the province can provide operating dollars if, let's say, there is a long-term care home that wants to locate there, but at the same time, we don't provide the dollars to buy it. So the problem we have here is that really no one has come forward and expressed, as far as we know, an interest in the property, so that we could then engage them in explaining to them the community's vision. And I guess that won't happen until the certainty of what the city, yeah. So the province, and Mike, you would know this, the province does provide funding for operating beds. So that's the way usually they get funded. But you have to have a long-term care home that is willing to locate there.
But no one has expressed interest because maybe they haven't got the request.
That's true. That's true.
If they throw out there to all the private companies, they might be some interest.
And that's what we were asking the hospital to do, to put out a request of interest to see if someone would come forward.
But if the province provides 90% of the funding for operating costs, they must have somebody able to exercise to come in.
For hospitals.
Okay, well.
Not for long-term care home. What we would need here, ideally at the table, would be someone that is willing to purchase the land, perhaps a developer. Then we could come forward with an element that is institutional. We could come forward with an element where the city may want to see some aspect that is that reflects the community's vision as far as city services are concerned, and bring everybody together. We need to put all those elements together in order to make it work.
But it seems to be kind of strange.
Which we could happen in the future, but it has not happened yet because, as you say, rightly so, probably nobody knows that it's for sale.
But if you say they won't sit down with you at the table, but that, you know, the Ministry of Health has to sit down with them and say, listen, sit down with Laura and the local people.
No, so the Ministry of Health, so the report between the hospital and the Ministry of Health is already happened. Basically, they do have the go-ahead for the new hospital that happened years ago. The new hospital has been built. It's the official opening happened last week. The patients will move over on October 18th, I think. And so they have all the approvals that they need from the province. But the province doesn't own that land. It doesn't own that land. The land belongs to the hospital board. They are separate, independent corporations.
Yes, thank you, and thank you to members of the panel for the information and discussion you've given us. In terms of my first question is it possible that you might be in a position to appeal if you're not successful in because a lot of things will come out in the argument of the case in front of the judge, and then the judge's response to that decision perhaps, and especially if it's negative. Would you, what criteria would you use, without giving any particulars, of course, to make an appeal?
Sure. So I hope everyone heard the question. It boils down to, you know, what options would the city have to appeal if you had a negative decision? And it's a little premature to comment too much on this, but I'll try and give you what I can, okay? When you have a decision of an Ontario Superior Court of Justice judge, and you're trying to appeal it, the appeal would be to the Court of Appeal for Ontario, and you would actually have to meet certain criteria. If it's a factual error, so we don't know what the decision would say, you'd have to actually analyze the decision to see if there's one of two things really. The one type of appealable thing is if they got a fact wrong, a relevant fact, and it'd have to be this is the language, I'm not trying to use kind of gobbledygook, but it's palpable and overriding error. So that's the test. These things don't happen very often, in my experience, particularly with a written record. As you'll recall, I was saying that the facts are going to be put out in writing, so it would be a little surprising to have that type of error. The second type of error that you might see appealed is if we think that there's an error in law. So this would be if the city's thought that the judge's analysis of the law was incorrect, and that for that reason, the decision was wrong. So those are the types of things that you consider on whether to appeal or not. But it's just other than those comments, I can't say too much because it would be so speculative. We don't even have a decision yet.
Thank you. My next question is to the planner.
Yeah, and we want to make sure that everyone gets an opportunity to ask questions, so we're going to try to keep the questions to a limit, like 3 minutes, please.
If anybody wants to ask some questions, you can please line up, because I want to get everyone an opportunity to speak. Okay, so this will be your last question.
Well, I have sub-questions.
Well,
Could they apply for, in the interim, while this process is going on, could the hospital, given the belligerence of the nature of the CEO thing, could they apply for a demolition permit for part or all of the structure?
Yes.
Okay. In terms of, and it was brought up earlier by the gentleman, the TPA, the Toronto Parking Authority, they had also property that was in the public realm, and very specifically on the pressure from the community, and you're aware of this, came up with certain solutions, and now it's expanded. So they were specific in their request for proposal. Now, that's not the case yet. We understand, you're just putting it out and going for the highest bidder. What would it take, my question is, what would it take, given that our NPP, our councillor and other political initiatives have taken, what kind of community pressure from your experience could wake this guy up and also make it a public issue? Because at one time, directors used to come directly from the community. There were people appointed from Weston. To my knowledge, there aren't anymore. They're from mostly the medical and the higher areas of the private sector. So what kinds of things should we be doing? Or maybe that's more appropriate for
We're
you.
only talking about 1.25 acres. They own 11 acres. We don't own the 11 acres.
Yes, I know. That wasn't my question, Madam Chair.
Okay, let me just.
That would be your last question,
Okay,
okay? then
that
we're
is
gonna
my
go.
last
Yes.
question.
Okay, the difference between the Toronto Parking Authority is they're a board, like an arm-length board of cities, so the city does have some ability to speak to them. Humber Hospital is a private entity, a private landowner, and as I said, any private landowner can file any development application they see fit to file at any point in time. It's up to city council through the recommendations of professional staff to say whether it's a good idea or a bad idea. And as the councilor is saying, the city covenant is over a very specific piece of land. There is still 10 acres, which is a substantive development parcel in the context of the city of Toronto. The Humber Hospital, even if they lose the court application, still has full control.
Yes, the part of my question though was in terms of pressure from the community, because people perceive a hospital in the public realm,
Well-
even though it's operating independent. So I guess my question should be to you, Councillor, what kind of public pressure should we be putting on
The land
hospital?
does not belong to the city.
That wasn't my question.
No, but okay. Laura, do you want to answer that because it's provincial? Well, I don't know what the question is.
Provinces and own
Yeah.
the land, so.
Okay, we'll go to the next question. I'd like to get the residents around the
It
hospital.
was
Yeah.
about putting pressure
No,
on.
I think I understood the
Thank
question.
you.
I think the answer is, it's not clear that any pressure that the community comes up with is gonna change the bargaining, because you have this private entity, and their raison d'etre, what their goal is to raise as much money as they can, and that's what they're gonna be guided by. That's what I think. That's who we're negotiating with. So, next question. Thank you.
I'm going to give a quick summary. I've only got 3 minutes. But I think people should be mentioning that land that was donated. I think it was donated. It wasn't sold. The value at the time was 800, whatever you said.
It was sold. There was a transaction.
It was sold.
The town of Weston did receive the money.
Okay, but the thing is, it was given in the intent that there would be a hospital for the returning war veterans from World War II. It was the Humber Memorial Hospital, and these families were growing, and they wanted a hospital with baby care, nursery, and that's how it started out. My 4 children were born there. And then over the years, this hospital expanded, and it's cost millions and millions of dollars, and you're talking about taking it down. It just doesn't make sense. The people that put in their money and effort don't want to see this hospital torn down. They want to see something equivalent in the public realm and not in a private realm. Now the thing is, that CEO is walking away from this, as you said. See you in court. He told me the same. I took them to OMB with my own money when they were expanding the last time, and I said that site wasn't suitable for what they wanted. And the CEO has the backing of the board of directors, and as I think we just heard, they are not people that live in our community. They're doctors and lawyers and this and that and the next thing, not representing the community's interests. So they own the land, not the community. And that's very, very unfortunate. But I think reading that thing on this application to this thing, there's something that could be put in to maybe strengthen the resolve of Ronnie if he knows the situation.
Well, I speak without the mic. I'll try and project. Legal's review of the file includes all the history of the matter, but what this boils down to is a contractual dispute, and there is case law on how you interpret a covenant on a deed, and those specific arguments that I took you through of the hospitals, those are each things that the city has to address and respond to. I certainly appreciate you, sir, bringing these items to my attention, but I was aware of those items. So part of what we need to do as city staff is provide the best professional advice we can, and included in that is doing all the diligence we think is appropriate, and it includes the whole history of the hospital and the manner in which that 1.25 acre parcel was initially transferred. So I hope I can give you that comfort.
Well, I hope so, but if this thing goes through, which it looks like it will, you're going to be able to persuade all of council. There's one councillor here, we've got full support, and we've got some of the political support. But what about all the other councillors that are going to vote on this thing?
I'm not sure what you're referring to, because we haven't suggested what we would recommend to city council here, and we've been careful not to, frankly, because we can't give you that today. That's a privileged item, and if I started talking about it today, it's not that I don't want to tell you. I frankly would like to tell you. I literally can't, because if I tell you, it's no longer privileged, and that means that the hospital can then raise that in court if they like. So that's the constraint we're under here. We really the report would have to be to
I
council.
think it's a lack of communication from the public's awareness. We know in this little area, but not many other people do. Is there anybody here from the press?
Yeah, they're here.
Oh, okay.
Frankly, it just wouldn't change what I do. I have
No,
this
I know,
professional
I know.
obligation to the city and my colleagues here. We have we take it quite seriously. We take serving this public community quite seriously.
Okay,
So
you.
thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you.
I guess I've ended up coming up here with some different questions than what I originally intended to
Yeah,
ask.
here you are.
One of the questions I would like to ask is, what amount of land is actually entailed here? Are we talking about whether you win or lose the thing? Is this going to also mean the removal of all the houses on Church Street, on Uphill Drive, and at the back of the hospital as well? Does the hospital actually own all those houses? The other thing I just would like to know, because this is a community that seems to be gradually being led of any public services, any identity, short of what the people themselves seem to be fighting for. We will be the only section of Toronto that comprises Toronto that doesn't actually have an emergency hospital. I don't think this would happen if this was in Rosedale. I don't think you would be seeing intensification of housing if this was in Forest Hill. I would also like to know how what most people believe was a public institution, a hospital that was actually built with an awful lot of fundraising by individuals, by the public, not by corporate faceless entities. I would also like to know, how did a public building suddenly become a private company? The government, the province doesn't want to claim any responsibility for it. The city doesn't want to claim any responsibility for it. Presumably the federal government doesn't want to claim any responsibility for it. How did a private corporation suddenly get hold of something that the public paid for? And I would also like to know, considering this is supposed to be just a percentage of the pieces of property, why are they so greedy that they have to have the whole pie and not even leave crumbs for anyone else?
This is a question to ask Mr. Dillon. It doesn't, it's not, nothing to do if you're in Rosedale. It's the issue. No, but the issue is. Hold on, let me finish. The issue is that they built this big hospital in Downsview. That decision was made to build this super hospital on Wilson Avenue. And when they made that decision, their decision was that they have to close 2 hospitals. And that's how the decision was made. And they chose the 2 hospitals they were going to close, which was Keele Street and Church Street.
So that's 3 hospitals.
No, I'm told that Finch is gonna remain open, that's what I'm told. Well, that's what we've been told, so I don't know if they're closing. Well, I don't know, I'm sorry, I don't know.
They will keep a few RNs there just until the transition occurs. They will run just the CT, MR, maybe an ultrasound, and one X-ray room. That is all. Just for people to come through the urgent care and then be transferred.
Okay.
Mark my words, they will close that in a couple of years.
Okay, I don't know the answer to that. I don't know the answer to that because I'm not part of the hospital or part of the province. The next question, next question.
You didn't answer the question about how much of the land is actually owned by
Oh, how much of the land, do you know?
various houses are getting their rights.
Okay, just a sec, we'll find out.
The hospital owns approximately 11 and a half acres in total. 11 and a half acres in total. And along the Church Street frontage, based on the property outline I'm looking at, there are buildings that appear that they look like they're single-family dwellings. I don't know if they're used as office space or rented out by the hospital, I'm not sure. They are included as part of the hospital property.
So it's 11.5 acres that they
As these questions go along, could you just tell us
Okay,
what's the fair market?
you have to stand in line, please, if you have a question.
I only want to know what's the fair market value of the land in dispute and what's the fair market value of total property, and it's only so that we can put it in perspective.
So sir, the city has not done appraisal work on the lands.
Why are you
So what I'm about to say is I don't want to get in a position whereby any answers I say here tonight would prejudice potentially a settlement with the hospital at the end of the day. Okay? So what we did say at the beginning was we're trying to get land to use potentially as parkland. That's the push that we've been putting on. It's not been discussions about money, but I'm not saying that it can't come down to money at the end of the day. So I'm not going to say here tonight how much we think each of the process is worth, because that would jeopardize our position.
Okay. Next question.
So my name is Bill Taylor. I live at Kenyon Pine. And the question is about potential OMB. So if the city is unsuccessful or even for the piece that the hospital currently owns, if they put a development to make it residential, and the city council does not approve that application, does the developer have an opportunity to take that to the OMB and have it overturned?
The answer to that is yes. Any development application at any point in time, if an applicant does not like the decision of city council, they have the right to appeal it. Also, the Planning Act allows for a right of appeal after a certain period of time, so council has to make a decision effectively, according to the Planning Act the way it stands right now, within 180 days of a largish application, or they have that right of appeal.
So this is a secondary question that I just wonder what the province's plans are to eliminate an undemocratic body that has such a wide impact on the community.
So the province would not have a plan to take what you call an undemocratic body because they're following all the rules that are in place. They do have, a board of directors that is deciding, and in essence, we have this new hospital that has been built, as the councillor pointed out, at Keele and Wilson, and it's state of the art new hospital. And it's 2.2 kilometers away from the one that we have right now. So I know my kids were born at the church site. I have a lot of affection for the church site hospital, and I understand, it's really, and I agree, it's really sad that it's closing. At the same time, all I can say, never mind what the hospital, the board, or the province says. My own doctor, who is affiliated with that hospital, said to me, Laura, it's not built to, for the technology of today. And I've been at that emergency room many times, for myself, for my mother, for my kids, and you see that you're basically on top of each other. There's no room for anything. And this is why they needed a bigger footprint. They needed more space. Maybe they didn't need all the space that they got. That I agree with you, but it's a point of view. But they certainly could not fit a new facility, let's say, with all that we need for our healthcare, for our families' healthcare, on the land that they have here at church. So that's all I'm going to say. But I want to also point out that as a community, this is an important moment. I know it's a turning point, but we are trying everything we can, and we will continue, I am sure. The councillor, myself, the MP, everybody in the community, we will fight for a vision that is good for our community. We will not just lay low and say, well, anything that can happen will happen. And we've been trying to do that already, even though we are limited in what we can do at the moment until we see what the future foresees.
What I'm hearing tonight is that effectively we are collateral damage. We have an institution that is out to maximize the return for their own monetary need. They're going to fight you at having any portion given to Parkland or for the community because it doesn't offer a return to them that's substantial. You read in the paper that developers downtown are building these horrible, intense condos, smaller and smaller, because they get a better return on their investment dollar the smaller the units are. And that's what we're faced here if we're not very careful. And they just go to the OMB and get a rubber stamp. I don't see how anybody's going to be able to stop these people. Until we change the OMB, for a start, we're not going anywhere.
Actually, talking about the OMB, if you have any questions, please come down the aisle. There's a microphone. The city council just last week, we were discussing the new City of Toronto Act, and one of the requests that we have made to the province is to abolish the OMB. So that was one of the requests we did make, and that the city will have the authority on any planning applications and community adjustment. So that was one of the requests we did make, because the majority of councillors are not happy with decisions from the Ontario Municipal Board.
Or rank ballots.
Back to the planning people. You said that the official plan for the City of Toronto designates the whole property as institutional?
Yeah.
And as I understood the act, the OMB doesn't have the right to rewrite Toronto's official plan. Am I correct? You can't appeal an official plan. The board would have to ask the city to amend the official plan if they didn't want it to be institutional.
No, that's not right. What would happen, and again, this is, please, I understand the angst of the community, totally, absolutely, completely. This is all very speculative. Tomorrow, someone could approach Humber Hospital with an idea to redevelop as a community hub of services. So, but okay, well, I'm just trying to say that what we're talking about is extremely speculative. But if we want to talk to what this lady was talking about, a residential redevelopment of it, it would be a site-specific official plan amendment. So it would seek to change the official plan for that property and that property alone. It doesn't challenge the entirety of the city's official plan. It would seek a change at a very site-specific level on a very specific property. And that's
the ordinance?
Yes, it is. It's the purview of council to say yes or no to that application, and it's the right of the applicant to appeal council's decision if they don't like that. So they do have that right to appeal on a site-specific official plan amendment.
So tonight,
We wanted to hear the comments about the settlement, correct? Because direction as far as the settlement, because as it was mentioned by our solicitor, yes, I know, the court date will probably be the end of October. And the reason I asked for this meeting is I wanted to get some suggestions, ideas as far as the legal settlement. The planning process will come at a later date, but right now the priority is the court date, which is scheduled for October the 30th, and to get some comments as far as where we stand legally on that 1.25 acres.
Well, it's not really a question, but someone here earlier asked the question, how does the land that should be a government-owned land, because there's a hospital, because the hospital is a government-owned property, how can they have corporate owning the land? I didn't hear an answer how that happened.
Laura?
Or was that when Harris was in power that he wanted to sell off, because at that time, I worked for Ontario Realty Corp, and he had an agenda to sell off a lot of government property, so was this land one of those properties?
It's provincial land, so.
It's not provincial land. I wish it was. It would be better. You know, we would have some answers. But well, the province doesn't own the land just like the city doesn't, Francis. What can I tell you? I don't know exactly when this change happened. I'll be honest. I do not know, and I don't know if anyone else in the room knows. So it is not owned by the province. It is owned by the hospital and the hospital board. It is not owned by the province. So I can show you. I even consulted with the Ministry of Health, and they wrote back and they said it is an independent corporation. They have to answer to they have to follow the hospital act. They don't own the land.
So the hospital doesn't own the land?
The hospital owns land. The hospital owns land. So the hospital is financed by the province, but the hospital is an independent entity. They have their board of directors that they have to answer to. Yes.
What was the corporation formed for the hospital?
Yeah.
Well, way back, I have no idea.
It's private?
No, it's public, and they have to publicize their annual general meetings on the paper. They do that every year.
It's confusing.
It was supposed to be a veteran hospital, so.
Originally, yes. Originally, but see then, as you say, under the Harris years, 3 hospitals were amalgamated together, so it probably goes back to that time. I don't, sorry.
You must have,
Yeah, so the deed,
who was
it's
it sold to?
the hospital.
Sold to the hospital.
That's right.
And the hospital was what?
It was a development corporation that was planning to develop the hospital at that time, so they were accumulating land in order to do that, right? In terms of the covenant, that's partly why you see that covenant, right? Because it was prospective in terms of whether the hospital was actually going to get built. I think what's important to note here is the dispute we're dealing with isn't about whether this hospital stays or goes. This hospital is gone. Partly what I'm going to try and do is speak with you in a really straightforward way. I respect and applaud the sense of community that you've all expressed tonight. I understand your angst in terms of having good medical care locally and close to your homes. These are important fundamental things that we relate to as Canadians, I think. However, what we're trying to deal with here effectively for this community and for the city generally is the dispute about this covenant. And that's all we can help you with in terms of this hospital. The hospital is moved. It's not going to change. We can't hold up the sale. We don't have any rights. What you've heard is the province doesn't have any rights with respect to those lands. In terms of the city's rights, it's really, these rights are dealt with in this covenant, and it's only a small percentage of the site. In terms of redevelopment of the site, what you've heard is that there is a planning approval process that would have to be followed if they wanted to redevelop it in some way that's non-institutional. I understand your angst and concern about the process at the Ontario Municipal Board. You've heard from the councillor what the city's position is regarding the OMB and what we'd like it to be moving forward. But we can't give you any certainty in terms of what's going to happen at that site. What we're trying to give you is information so your community understands what is at stake in this litigation and what we're doing to try and help. Okay?
So, no, I want some people that haven't asked a question, please. There are some people, and then we're gonna, I just want to make it very clear, and everybody knows, the hospital made a decision to close up and build that new hospital. How many years ago? Yeah. So, the decision of closing the hospital was made years ago. And so, tonight, what we want to talk about, and the only reason that we are here actually, that we have a say, is because of the covenant for 1.25 acres. If it wasn't for that covenant that was signed in 1948, the hospital would have put the site on the market without even telling me, without telling the community, and selling it, because they don't have to tell the community. So the only reason we're here, we're fortunate because of that covenant that we were able to delay it and to negotiate. And my priority is that site to get what's best for the community and to keep negotiating and not give up the 1.25 acres. And that's why I have all the legal staff, the mayor has been involved in, we've all been involved in it to try to make the best for that site for the community. It was very clear when we had our original meeting is that we would like to see long-term care, seniors residents. I'd like to see a daycare center. We need some of that, and maybe a partnership. The ideal solution would be that to be a partnership with the province, the Fed, the city, and we provide services on that site, services that are needed for the community. That would be the ideal. And the best thing is that somebody can come up with the money that the hospital needs for their share for the new hospital and get them out, and then have a municipal or a government sort of ownership on that land. That would be the ideal solution. But who's going to come to the table, and because they want to get as much money as they can on that site, and they will sell to the highest bidder because they want to get the best, and because they need that money for their share. So next question.
Yeah, I know this is an individual situation.
I think it was
I'm just wondering that if there's been any similar things that have happened in the city before, like similar covenants, or in other cities, what has been the usual result? Or would it favor the community in the city, or is it typically always go to the developer or the person who owns the land?
Well, this is the first one I know.
So it's a fair question, but I want to note it almost leaks into you asking the strength of our case, right? That, it's not lost on me that if I were in your shoes, I would want to know the strength of the case. We can't talk about that. In terms of if there's cases with the same type of covenant, same type of situations, this is not a typical covenant that you see. What we go on in terms of analyzing the strength of our case is we look at the case law. So are there any cases out there with similar language, similar covenants? That stuff we do review. That's what we have to consider. We also consider the case law that tells us how do you interpret a contract and contractual language. And we also have to look at cases that interpret the relevant statutes. So that's what we are doing. I can't really provide you any more comments, I'm sorry.
the city interest is that we want to make sure we get our share. We don't want to give everything away to the hospital.
Just to confirm, you did mention that whatever settlement happens, there could be a possibility where that parcel of property remains with the city and the rest of it goes to the hospital and you can sell it. Is that correct?
So, I think you said in the context of settlement.
If there's a settlement, there's some favor.
So if we received a favorable decision from the court, it's not without some uncertainty in terms of how that would play out. Would we just get the monetized value, so the amount of money that right's worth? Because there's some difficulties because this parcel of land, the 1.25 acres, actually has partly a building on it. So there's some complexity there. I can't give you the full analysis, I apologize. It's not that we haven't thought about it, I just can't divulge it. In terms of whether there'd be a settlement that involves the whole site, I won't comment on that either. What I've told you earlier, and this is really as far as I can go, is what we see as being in the community and the city's best interest is if we can obtain some certainty of a portion of land that would, for a parkland use. That's really what we've considered.
Would be for the use, but not necessarily for ownership by the city.
No, it would also include ownership. That's what we've been considering.
The land is not landlocked, though. It is a parcel that would be available, say, a street or something. It's not landlocked by other.
The parcel is not landlocked, the 1.25 acres. But again, getting into these types of details is a little tricky because we just don't know how it's going to play out.
So actually, now that you brought that up, just so for everyone's clarity, the parcel of property is along the frontage along Church and along Uphill, correct?
Yeah. We actually have a map. I'm not sure if you can see it. So the yellow is the entire site, and the rose-colored portion is the 1.25 acre parcel that was conveyed in 1948. That's subject to this covenant. So you can see that there is some frontage, but it's limited relative to the whole 1.25 acres.
It's the parking lot. It looks like it's pretty much the parking lot.
A portion of it is. There's a portion of building.
There's a portion of a building on it.
Like one of the residents, or maybe something, or the other ones.
May I see?
Of course, please.
You're looking for solutions. I just want to suggest the unthinkable. Use the leverage that you have with that covenant. Buy the entire property. Negotiate to buy the entire property. You'll have full control over it. You can use it for the benefit of the people of Toronto. There won't be any hospital board to deal with. Why not that? Why not just settle the whole thing? It's so easy. And that was what I was asking about the fair market value of the property. Buy the property so that we can use
Money. The city's broke.
Well, it'd be nice if we had the money, but we don't have the money.
See?
So
The city's broke.
No money.
No money.
No money.
The city is making money to buy that.
Okay. It would be nice, if anybody was to purchase it, it would have to be a partnership with all three different levels of government, because you're talking millions of dollars. The city does not have millions of dollars to purchase the site.
Of course.
I think that if the province maybe shown an interest, maybe the federal, there could be possibilities of partnerships there. But for one to purchase it, it's a lot of money. So you won't get one level to purchase it. But if all three levels sat down, I think there's opportunities. There's opportunities there. But as I said, they want to sell their land. They want to get as much money as they can. And so, the value?
So I think you've heard earlier, Joe mentioned we're not going to discuss it. It's potentially problematic to get into discussing that here. I hope you appreciate that we're not trying, we're trying to protect the interest.
Well, can I ask a different question? What is the hospital's perspective of the value?
You can ask.
Okay.
Well, We don't, I mean, they haven't, I guess we'll know when they put it on the market. You'll get the listing, I guess. Yeah, unless it's a private listing, I don't know. We'll probably more than likely be private.
So how dangerous is this decision that's going to be put forth to us? There's a lot of lands in Toronto that are willed to the city. Denison Park, you know what, you've got Swanwick Park. And so what does this judgment come down? What does it do for everything that was willed and for everybody thinking they're going to will their land because they don't have any children to the city? How is that going to affect the city moving forward? And is everybody putting great thought into that? Because this really starts the ball rolling.
Sorry, so what you're asking for is legal advice, and I can't give it to you. The only person I can give legal advice to is City Council, and I'm sorry, I just can't give you that.
We have a community that's given a lot of land of their own to the city for community use, and now we're going back on it.
It's the town of Weston that conveyed it, and that's the covenants in the favor of town of Weston, and the city of Toronto is assumed it.
Not to form the legal advice, but some of these other properties that have been willed in the past, are we at risk of losing them now?
No, I understood the question. I just can't answer it for you.
Because it's that dangerous, I guess.
Well, the thing is, it's 1.25 acres. So all the hospital had to do is say to the city, here's your 1.25 acres, and I'm going to build on the other 10.5 acres. They can do that. So you still get your 1.25 acres. It doesn't make any difference. You're still going to build, they're going to still sell the land. Either way. You know? Because it's only 1.25 acres. It's not, it would be different if it was like 9 acres. Then you would negotiate. Okay, so we'll have one last question.
More of a point of curiosity, going back to the gentleman's statement back there. It's kind of short-sighted to say the city doesn't have the money to own the whole property. Millions and if you live in the city of Toronto, you know. You live in the city of Toronto, so you know the value of the property just goes up and up and up. So it would be kind of short-sighted to say that we don't have money in the city to just buy the land. Because given it a bit of time, that land appreciates in value, and then you can sell it off to whatever you want. So I don't know, I just thought it was a very short-sighted comment on your part. The city doesn't have the money.
Well, I wish it was that easy. I wish we did have the money, because if we did, we would purchase it.
Well, there's 3 levels of government right here.
The city being willed land or donated land, the city does acquire land through that process. In this case, the lands were not donated to the city, they were donated, basically it was given or sold to another entity. So when it comes to parkland acquisition in the city, there's a plan from our Parks Division that deals with budgets and deals with how much money we have to spend in each area. So if the community wanted to go down that road, they could ask questions of the planning department, parks department, as to what funds might be available to look at purchasing lands in this area for parkland or for community uses. But there's definitely rules that the city goes by in terms of local parkland acquisition and citywide parkland acquisition. Okay, so in terms of that, if the community wanted to go down that route, we'd have to explore, I'll say, a separate avenue altogether.
There are agencies from the city that do purchase where they build affordable housing. And what I'm saying is that please let me finish. There is a department for affordable housing where they do purchase some properties to build affordable housing, part of Toronto Housing. Those are the agencies that would purchase properties and build Toronto. But other than that, there is no other agency in the city that purchases it. Even parkland, it's only an acre or 2. It wouldn't be 11 acres. Okay. Hey, the city would never purchase 11 acres for a park. It would be nice. I wish we could. Okay, one last question.
Well, it's not a question. People were asking what the market value of the land is, and the only piece of property that was this size recently was the Kodak site, which was 54 acres, was sold to Metris Properties for $21 million. The city then purchased it back from Metris Properties because the city had a use for it, meaning the streetcar repair facility, for I think it was $31 or $32 million.
Metrolink purchased it.
The city was prepared to purchase it, and then the province.
Metrolinks, yes, and the province came and
The
purchased
city
it.
was in line
Yeah.
to purchase it when the city was going to run it. And so that's just to give you an idea of market values of industrial land. The industrial land that was the Kodak site was around in the order of $500,000 an acre, and I'm guessing that this is going to be roughly the same. It might be more now because that was just to give you ballparks.
Okay, so our next steps. Okay, so the staff will continue working and trying to negotiate a settlement, and hopefully by the end of October 30th, and then whatever decision is made, whatever settlement will go through council and then to the community. So that's the process. So I wanted to update everyone because a year ago, 2 years ago, when we had our public meeting, we did talk about it. And that I would let the community know when we heard the status. And it was just recently that we were served by the hospital, which I was actually quite surprised. I thought that they would be able to negotiate and try to work with the city and with the community, but unfortunately that didn't happen. And so we will let you know at the end of the month. Now, as far as what happens after that, as it was mentioned by there you are, Neil. There's a public process as far as any development applications that come in, and there's a number of public meetings that are held, so we would notify you of that. So I hope everyone signed in, and we will update everyone.